Welcome back to the Warcraft News, everybody. Today it's going to be real fun, but first I've got a quick PSA for you. It is currently Pilgrim's Bounty, so be sure to go and get your 10% reputation buff from the major cities, and that now includes Dornogal. As for the news, though, we have got so much. We've got big lore, some big maybe lore, and we've got the World of Warcraft team saying a lot of words to journalists. Unfortunately, not all of the words are good words, though a few were actually good, so at least there's that. They are finally acting on a years-long pet peeve that I think we've all had, and that is goddamn swirlies absolutely everywhere. And even more crazy, we actually know why the Warcraft narrative team went on their entire Cosmology lore chart bender for over half a decade. Kinda wild, and funnily enough, lore is actually a big bit of today's sponsor. They are a long-time channel supporter, boot.dev, who have just got even better. Now, they're the best place to learn back-end web development using Python and Go. They are structured as a community RPG. They're made by fellow viewers of the channel, and they've just got better with a clean, fresh new UI. And in a world where it's all modern, soulless, they're leaning into RPG, which I love. So that's real satisfying, and they've also added the spellbook feature. It is so smart. As you progress through the whole learning pathway, you unlock new spellbook pages, which are all searchable. They're full of concept explainers, documentation, and code examples, all accessible via a hotkey while you are going through their lessons. It is so good. And it's stuff like that that I love about their platform. It is designed as an experience, not just a product, and it really does work. Their learning pathway is, of course, substantial, from the basics like learning Python, to examples like running a server-client Pokedex, through to a module even on finding an actual job in the industry, and then bonus deeper learning modules as well. They have got so much, and really, Boot is led by two brothers, and you can tell big corporations can't make an experience like this that's that effective, but also has got that level of heart. So you can check out boot.dev and start learning today at boot.dev/Bellular Warcraft. If you go there, you get 25% off your first purchase. I go annual for the biggest saving, and if it's not for you, well, they have a no questions asked 30-day refund, and you can even browse all their materials and their demos for free. I'll do something absolutely mad and start with the good news. So, World of Warcraft is trying to solve the swirly problem. Announced in an interview with encounter designers on Max's stream, the raid team have at least made a new graphic for swirly effects in the game. The new effect's coming in patch 11.1, so it will be there for the raid, it'll be there for the whole dungeon pool, and basically, Blizzard, if there's a solid outline, so we actually know where our characters can stand, that'll be absolutely gaming. And even better, it would be lovely if it didn't get randomly hidden behind other effects on the screen. They did say that this is going to be on the PTR, and they very much want feedback, so yeah, it's going to be there. It's our civic duty. Then next they talked about a fun thing that's an old drama that we didn't really notice this time around. So, this current raid has been full of private ores, but nobody really paid them any attention. And that's basically a good thing. It almost shows that they're slowly solving the weak ore problem. I mean, again, I still say surely, and it's very much for raids, not exactly dungeons. I can at least say that when tanking, Matt, one of the guys in our team, he was using DPM timers only, he had no issues. I was playing Rat Paladin, I had no weak ores that were content specific, and I also had no issues. So, that stuff's pretty good. Next, though, we can talk about classes and UI. The next good thing for me, and is something that we have all felt for so long, and it's finally good to see it be admitted, that every patch falls into the same trap. Like crazy, and Blizzard knows it's happening as well. The idea that the patch comes out, the rewards are way, like just too low, and then Blizzard ends up having to buff the tits out of them. A great example of that is the 20th anniversary patch. So, the good news is, they know it's a problem, and they know why it's happening. The less good news is that they might not do that much about it. So, this comes from Games Radar Plus, and Ian basically noted that it, quote, may start to seem like a pattern that it keeps on happening. And his explanation for this is that they always start off with a conservative plan, and they basically think, well, we will start really conservative, and if we need to buff it, then yeah, we can just buff it. But if they're too generous, and they are just too generous off the bat, it's not like they can nerf rewards without players feeling absolutely horrible. Now, in one way, I totally understand his logic, but I'd also say, Ian, first impressions really do matter, and I see so much of it in video comments. So whenever a patch comes out and it's got really underbaked rewards that make people feel like, oh my god, this is going to be a 10-week grind, I'm not going to enjoy this, what are they doing? That means that they don't really come back to the game and they leave with a bad impression. They basically think, oh, once again, the developers have no idea what they're doing and they had to listen to the players and now they've had to buff the thing. Now, I understand that it's just Blizzard wanting to be conservative so they have wiggle room, but I think it's actually hurting them in the long run here. Okay, next is another rough one, right? It's Delve Gearing and Mythic Plus. We all know it's a little bit weird, but honestly, I think the response was really concerning. So talking to the Comeback Kids and Jez Gordon, Ian said that they're happy with Delves and they're happy with Warbands, but that Mythic Plus lacks an on-ramp. Ian correctly says that whenever players hit tier 8 Delves, they're getting very powerful rewards. So whenever they go to get even more gear, well, they've got to go to Mythic Plus, but they've already got good gear. So they start doing Mythic Plus at +7. And that is a terrible place to start, as I'm sure many of you have felt if you've done a pug this expansion. Now, Ian says that this makes people bounce off Mythic Plus, where otherwise they'd just be playing the lower levels of the system and would be happy enough. They have plans to address this in Season 2, partially by making the Mythic Plus, like, lower keystone levels more rewarding. But, it's really concerning the way that they think about this feature, and I think we can all see the Delve Gearing kind of doesn't really make sense. I mean, you've got the bounties, which are, I guess, the one way you can get pretty good gear outside of the Great Vault, but, Ian, people are going into those Mythic Plus dungeons because the Delve gear stops at +8. Have you thought that they would perhaps rather play the Delves than the Mythic Plus, but you're forcing them into the Mythic Plus, and that may not be what they want to do, hence Mythic Plus being a bit of a shit show. Alright, our next stop in the news is balance, and we've had buffs, we've had nerfs. Here's the deal. So the Blood Death Knight's Deathbringer tree is actually getting the abysmal nerfs rolled back a little, which is kind of nice, but Frost DK, well, you're actually getting single target buffed, but your AoE is being toned down to basically, well, round that out. Druids then, well, good news, you're getting some love. Feral's getting a little bit more damage out, and Resto's getting their emergency Swift Mend healing brought up, but the nerf bat is coming in for Survival, Enhancement, and Prot Paladin, who are right now all just leading the meters. So Survival is getting a targeted pack leader nerf, Enhancement is actually losing some of their overall spender damage, and Prot Paladin's crazy new talent is being, well, tuned down because it was producing crazy big numbers. It's nothing too major, but it should mean just a little bit less sheer dominance. As for other changes, Fire and Windwalker are getting some much needed love across their entire output. They actually should be decently stronger in almost every situation after the next reset. Holy Priest is also getting a really nice buff, and the rest of the buffs are just targeting the hero talent tree specifically. So that's the Frostfire tree for the mages, Lightsmith for the Prot Paladins, Deathstalker for subtlety, Farseer for shaman, and Colossus for warrior. But don't worry, it's not the damage of Colossus, it's just the survivability because, yeah, you guys are already doing plenty of damage. I've actually got some more good news. A while ago I told you about the upcoming Battle for Azeroth meta achievement. Just like the Shadowlands and the Dragonflight ones, the way it works is you complete basically the entire content of an expansion and you get a mount for a reward. And this one is a sort of like Trash Raptor. It's really like dorky looking and I kind of love it. The problem is it was absolutely unhinged. Now, these meta achievements are basically a bit like a platinum trophy in PlayStation, so it's just doing everything. But the BFA one was unhinged. It asked for every rare, every pet, every island expedition, warfront, quest. It was way more overboard than the other ones. So the good news is Blizzard actually listened to the feedback, and now you'll only need a sizable chunk of things, not absolutely everything, and that makes it more like the others. This is another really good change for the live game, but honestly, it's way too late. Basically, right, we can now get chests that contain a random bit of Warbound gear for 350 Valor Stones each, which is good. I don't know about you, but I've been sitting at 2k stones on my characters, and I've just not been able to do anything with them. And the game makes it feel really bad, because you do a bit of content, you hover over it, and it says how many Valor Stones you should get, but it's just in red text to make you feel bad. But Blizzard, I can't spend any of the stones because you literally wouldn't let me. So now there is a way to do that. It's good for our alt catch-up, but I absolutely would want to see Blizzard do something here earlier in the next season and just a little bit more interesting, maybe not just some Warbound gear. Once again, there's actually some exciting lore. Whenever we saw the Siren Owl drop in the PTR, it was immediately clear that it is Forbidden Reach 2.0. The idea, right, of it's an island that's a bit stormy, and there's a special socketed ring. But actually, right, as much as we all would kind of roll our eyes at that and think, oh god, more formulaic trash, it's actually, in execution, the best type of sequel, but a very rare type of sequel. One that just does everything way better than its predecessor. And one thing that's pretty neat is the lore. So we got a Song of the Depths in the Forbidden Reach, and now we've got a new wink wink nudge nudge to the return of Queen Azshara. So we find an item that's called the Perishell Scroll Case, and it's got a message for the Darktide. They are one of the Naga clans from BFA, and it is packed full of lore teases. Basically, whenever we waltzed into Nazjatar in BFA, way, and, we tore a hole through Azshara's palace, we defeated her and all of that stuff. It seemed like the Naga were just on the back foot and kind of dealt with, which was sort of sad. I mean, that's one of World of Warcraft's best, most unique races, just dealt with in a single patch. Well, the good news is that's absolutely not going to be the case. In many ways, the Naga have actually been ahead of us players. As an example, they've also been chasing crystals. So Circe, the Siren of the Siren Isles, has been one of their targets for millennia. It turns out that her circlet can harness the power of these strange Azeroth crystals that have been about the place. And yes, we players will use that to do some more damage, but it's actually a lore important item, which I think is pretty neat too. So other Naga tribes have failed to get it, but the Darktide basically want to atone for the failures of the past, and they want to claim the circlet and use it to usher in their queen's return, which, is a bit spooky. We can add that to the pile of very obvious hints that Azshara is definitely coming back. I mean, it's been a slow build, but Blizzard absolutely seem to be cooking, and you know what's really neat? We actually have some evidence of them cooking. It's cool, it's their notes from a decade ago, we learned a bunch, including why the lore just went completely off the rails for a while. Okay, so here's the deal. Dave Kosak was leading World of Warcraft narrative design for a long time. He no longer works at the company, but he was doing it for 11 years, and he just celebrated his anniversary by sharing his original notes for the very famous and a little bit infamous Cosmology chart. So it turns out that Blizzard started working on this chart during the Cataclysm expansion because they basically wanted to codify how magic even works in Warcraft. It seems they were just kind of winging it based on vibes before. So Sketch 1 has got light associated with life and death associated with shadow. And that feels totally wrong with today's lore, but it actually fits loads of World of Warcraft's pre-chronicle lore. I mean, even think about the priest spell, shadow or death. Anyway, here's the real scoop. It's a PowerPoint version of the chart, and it's complete with elements. Now, I'm not going to bury the lead. Take a look at light, and tell me if there's something you see there that's not on the chart on Warcraft Chronicle. We'll get to that in a sec, but the details are also quite neat, like the elements of spirit and water making up life, of fire and air making up holy. That actually could be quite relevant to a lot of modern lore. Anyway, Dave says that matches Red Paladins, and it definitely makes me think of the Hallowfall Arathi. But of course, look back up to light, what do we see? We see the Archons, right? This group called the Archons standing atop the Naru, and they're opposing the Void Gods, who of course are atop the Old Gods. Old Gods being the likes of, Cthulhu, Yogg-Saron, N'Zoth, etc. So this really shows the idea of there being powerful pantheons of beings that it was basically there a long time ago, that they did have those cosmic ideas. But there's a big lesson in this, right? Writers are almost always riffing as best as they can, rather than perfectly knowing everything all the time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and a perfect example of it working is actually Final Fantasy XIV stuff, basically with the likes of Shadowbringers, which people have said is just, completely renowned for its storytelling and how well its lore just ties everything together. People often thought they had a grand plan, but the writers actually said, no, we did not have a plan for that. We didn't know any of those things in advance. They just wrote their new story in a way that wove in with the stuff in the past, in a way that made it seem like it was all planned out. So it's kind of funny how writing actually works. And it's in the weaving of those threads that it all kind of comes together. Now, what Dave said is that with this, he didn't really have a plan, like a super solid idea, because they needed to work out just what magic actually was. They had a direction, and in the working out of it, he says he felt he was discovering a primal truth about how Warcraft worked. But then here's where it all went kind of wrong and bad. So, you know the way World of Warcraft got super cosmic for the next few expansions? Like, it started in Legion, and in Legion it was cool and new, and we always knew, like, the Burning Legion were sort of space dudes with Sargeras, right? But then it was really present in BFA in a way that felt kind of bizarre, a little bit clinical, and then Shadowlands was really bad for it, and obviously Dragonflight still had a lot of that rough DNA. Well, turns out there's a little bit of a reason. So the Cosmology chart was actually used to help onboard new designers, like by Dave, whenever the sort of changing of the guard was happening. And instead of just winging it, what they did is they made a massive cosmic lore Bible. The point basically being that anyone could look at that Bible and say, okay, well, this is how all of these things relate to each other, and they could get ideas for their story and structures for their story. There's likely so much stuff in that Bible that we players have got absolutely no idea about because it's an internal Blizzard document. I think that certainly it is not an excuse. It perhaps helps us understand how certain mistakes were made, and how the internal framing of so much of World of Warcraft's story and lore was, based on the Cosmology chart, instead of the Cosmology chart being a neat supporting part of the story. I'm thankfully glad that most of that's behind us. The lore is faring better, and I've got a real treat for you. So you know the strange fish in Hallowfall? There is so much more to that fish than most people know, especially if you just blast it through the side quest. So learn about it more in this next video.